Welcome to Religious Sentiments. I'm your host, Geovanny. In this episode, my co-host and I introduce ourselves and discuss our personal experiences of being raised in Catholic families. So, what are you waiting for? Let's go! Welcome to our first official full-length episode of Religious Sentiments. I'm your host, Geovanny, and today I am joined by my lovely co-host, Maddie.
Hey everyone, you cannot see me right now, but I'm super excited, and if I wasn't attached to the computer, I would actually dance right now.
So for today's episode, I thought it would be fun if we did a little icebreaker so that you get to know us a little bit more personally, and then we'll transition into more faith-based questions that we'll discuss. So the first question I have on our icebreaker is, what are you studying in school and why? So Maddie, would you like to go first? Ladies first.
Sure, thanks. So I'm actually studying at my local community college to get my associates specializing in paralegal studies. What about you?
So I'm studying at St. Leo University to get my bachelor's degree in digital communication. I actually had switched majors earlier this year to the new digital communication major because it had the specific classes I wanted to take. And I just in general chose to go the communications route with my degree and field of study because I'm very interested in multimedia and content creation and similar things in that area.
I think it's really important to choose something that you want to do for the rest of your life as your job. And so I think that's part of the reason why I chose paralegal, because I wanted to help people. That was the main reason. And lots of the careers I was looking at that was specified in helping people, I was like, it didn't quite fit with the lifestyle that I want in the future. And paralegal was the best fit. So I'll ask the next question. What are some of your hobbies?
To be honest, my hobbies kind of keep evolving and changing, but in general, anything creative. Over the years, I've done everything from painting to I used to play piano when I was younger, and I also was into sculpting and making things out of clay, specifically polymer clay, sculpting little like figurines and whatnot. And as of right now, my main two hobbies are photography and digital art. I have an iPad, so I use different apps to draw pictures, and I just generally enjoy digital art over traditional just because there's so much you can do with programs that you can't do with a physical sheet of paper, and ways you can manipulate whatever you're drawing or creating. So what about you?
So I really like to read and I like to write occasionally. I kind of go through like block of time where I'll be writing anything and then I'll stop. So I have several unfinished things that I've ditched. Then I do like to play soccer. It's been kind of hard to get together with people since the beginning of COVID though. And I just enjoy spending time with family and friends.
Since you mentioned soccer, I guess now is a good time to tell our audience that we actually used to be on the same team in high school. So go soccer. For anyone from OLR listening, you're awesome. So thanks. So the next question, I guess, is kind of related to hobbies because it is a hobby for some people. But what are some of your favorite movies and shows?
Ooh, okay, good one. I do like Star Wars a lot. So I would say Star Wars. I do like Lord of the Rings movies, but I'm not super into them like some people are, like my sister, for instance. Then I am a huge Psych fan. It's gotten to the point where I can go through all 8 seasons and look at each individual episode and be like, I remember what happened in that one. It's really bad. Don't judge me. What about you?
It's been a hot minute since I've seen Psych, but that is commitment. I'm pretty similar. I do like Star Wars a lot, and I'm sorry if this offends anyone listening, but I think I prefer the prequels over the original three movies. I'm so sorry if that hurts your feelings, but I grew up with the prequels. I like them, and then the Clone Wars TV series, not the original one from like I think 2003 that was 2D animated, but the 3D one with Ahsoka and all those other characters. I really got into that series growing up, and I really enjoyed it. And then for other movies I'm into, I would say I just recently got back into Marvel after not being into it for a few years. So I'm catching up on the MCU movies. I think the last one I saw was Captain America Civil War. And I'm also into Lord of the Rings, and I did read the books, but I would say I think I liked the movies better.
I am impressed that you read the Lord of the Rings books because I have tried reading the first book 3 different times. I stopped in the exact same place 3 different times. So I'm sorry, Lord of the Rings fans. I'm a failure.
Well, I actually owe that credit, I would say, to a teacher from high school. We read, if I recall correctly, all of the Harry Potter books and the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit in that class. And while I don't recall finishing the Hobbit book, I do believe I finished all three Lord of the Rings books. So, Miss Erica, if you're listening to this, thank you for making me more cultured, I suppose. And for getting me into the Lord of the Rings series at a deeper level. That was honestly one of my favorite classes in all of high school.
I remember Miss Erica. She was pretty cool. So putting that out there.
Exactly. So, what other fandoms and shows are you into then?
Like you said, I do agree with you over Marvel. I did not get into Marvel until later high school, even into early college. I'm sorry, Marvel fans, don't come at me, but I'm now part of the group. Then I do like Downton Abbey a lot. That was pretty good. And occasionally I'll watch like a spy show or something. What about you? Is there any other fandoms, interests?
I'm kind of having a little bit of trouble thinking of other fandoms right off the top of my head. I know that might sound a little crazy, but I would say in general, I do like anime as far as series go.
Another one that I was thinking of that I couldn't remember before is I do like a lot of the older cartoons, like Tom and Jerry, Wacky Races, and Looney Tunes. Really loved watching all of those growing up. So, old soul.
That's pretty cool. So I have one last for fun question, and that is, what are your favorite foods?
So, as a general, I would say Chinese food. I am an Asian woman and I have to make my heritage proud. So, I love Asian food. Also, I do like a lot of Americans' foods too, like pizza. I love pizza. I love trying different types of pizza and pasta. I love carbs. What about you?
For me, I would say my favorite general kind of food would be Hispanic slash Latin food. And this is very, very broad, but I'm including Spain, the Caribbean, and Central and South America in that whole big category. I know that's very diverse, but just in general, the foods I like tend to be from those countries. So,
Diversity is great. And also, I forgot about Hispanic food for a moment there.
I mean, that's probably a little biased for me because growing up with Puerto Rican family and whatnot, being Hispanic, I'm kind of a little biased, I guess.
So, transitioning more into faith based questions, what is your family's faith background?
So my family is Catholic, and I've been raised Catholic all my life. So how about you?
Same here. My mom was raised Catholic. My dad was not Catholic until he met her. And my sister and I both raised Catholic.
So as for the next question I have on the list, what are some of your experiences growing up in a religious family?
So my family, we growing up, but we went to church every Sunday, said prayer before meals. As we got older, we incorporate the after meal prayer as well. And we do say family rosaries whenever we're all together and able. What about you?
For me, it's pretty similar. Sunday mass. I'll just say Sunday as a whole because oftentimes growing up, we would go to Sunday mass and then either lunch or dinner afterwards, depending on the service we went to, if we went in the morning or in the afternoon. And praying together, doing, for instance, different devotional prayers, and also, now that I think about it, pilgrimages as well. Because, for example, there was one particular church where we would go to pray novena. And for those of you who've never heard of that word before, a novena is basically a period of 9 days where you pray for a particular intention, and there's usually a whole devotional and prayer that goes along with it. And there are tons of novenas out there, and it's a Catholic tradition that we did. And we would go to this particular church to make a mini pilgrimage to pray that novena together. So that is something I remember.
And how has your family supported you in your faith?
I would say, in the main way they've supported me in my faith is raising me in a Christian environment with strong Christian morals and to be a good Christian man. And I would specifically want to talk about my mom because she's been through so much with battling cancer and all these medical ailments. And despite all that, she keeps pushing through. She hasn't become this bitter, hateful person. She's lived out her faith and she prays. She's very devout. She's prayed for me, with me. And she is just this kind of like an energizer bunny because she just keeps going. And that is something that I really want to aspire to imitate in my own spiritual life, that no matter what life throws at you, no matter what cross you're asked to carry, no matter how bad and terrible things get, that there is always hope.
All right, that was really beautiful. I'm getting a little bit teary eyed, to be honest.
Guys, she just wiped her eye. You can't see it, but she did.
I just want to clarify, I do know his mom, and she is one of the loveliest people you will ever meet. And definitely, she exemplifies hope so much.
So how about you, Maddie? So how has your family supported you in your faith, whether, like I said, being a role model or whatnot?
So, my family is similar to yours. They raised me in a Christian environment. They have supported me through just everything, to be honest. When I was struggling with school, they supported me and they constantly reminded me, like, you can't do this without God. And so they would pray with me about it and pray for me. And just with other issues in the past that I've had too, like my mom in particular, if I could be just half the woman that she is, I would be really happy. Because just the way that she loves the Lord and her family, and she just is always willing to serve others. It's like I want to be like that one day. So I'm curious, what were some of the most important spiritual moments in your life and why?
Well, this might sound like a bit of a basic or generic answer, but obviously receiving the sacraments are going to be big moments. So baptism, which unfortunately I don't remember because I was a baby, first communion, which I do remember, confirmation, first reconciliation slash confession, whatever you want to call it. So those are really some of the big moments I remember. But as far as other times in my life, I would say I feel like I have those quote unquote mountaintop moments in my faith during retreats when I'm disconnected from just the everyday cycle of life and craziness of life. And I'm taking a specific amount of time to enter into a prayerful state and atmosphere and to make, I would say, maybe that silence, in the sense that I'm unplugged from social media, unplugged from school and all of that. And I'll probably talk about this on other episodes in the future, but there are specific moments at specific retreats I remember in high school where I had profound encounters with the Lord in one way or another. So, what about you? What are some of the most impactful moments that you can remember about your spiritual life?
So I believe that every Mass is special because we get to receive the Eucharist, which is God Himself, body, blood, soul, and divinity. And there is another time, I guess this would also kind of go with some of the hardest moments in my spiritual life, but it was when I was discerning my vocation. That was very hard for me, and it was something that I did struggle with for, say, the last part of middle school and into a good chunk of high school as well. And just with a lot of prayer, the Lord got through my dense head. So that was really important to me because I felt so relieved once I had at least part of the discernment over with. So, yeah.
That actually segues perfectly into the next question. So, and you've kind of already answered this already, but what are some of the hardest moments in your spiritual life and how did you get through it? So, if you wouldn't mind elaborating more of how you got through the vocation crisis, if you want to call it that.
Vocation crisis. That's kind of what it was.
I mean, it's pretty existential. So,
So there was a point in middle school, not high school, sorry, where I felt called to religious life. And I kept on trying to be patient. I was having trouble being patient. And so that was something I struggled with, going like, so is it religious life or marriage or maybe even single? And I'm someone who I just want to know. I'm ashamed to say that I don't have much patience or much true patience when dealing with things like that. I'm just like, oh, I just want to know now, just so I know what will happen. And that was something that just that waiting period that I really struggled with for a couple of years. And I would go through points that I was like, I think I'm okay as long as I'm in the Lord's will. And I would feel some peace. And then I'd be back at going, but really, what is it? What is it? It's just anxiety. And finally, in I would say sophomore or junior year of high school, I was sitting before the Blessed Sacrament in adoration. And I was like, Lord, please I know I've been praying about this for a very long time, but please just help me to be open to whatever you will for me, but also to know. And if you could send a sign, because I'm really dense sometimes, that would be nice. Literally that evening into the next morning, I had 2 signs that I was like, okay, this is, if that's not a sign, I don't know what is. And I can definitely go more in depth about this in a future episode because it can be really long. But yeah, that was something I really struggled with. And another thing I'm struggling with right now is just, it's been really hard with the spiritual life during the whole COVID situation. So it's been really hard past 6, 7 months now. So
I would I would agree that for me when I was thinking about this question, the whole COVID situation and pandemic is probably one of the hardest hits on my spiritual life in recent memory. For example, before the lockdowns and quarantines and whatnot happened, I was in the habit of, for instance, going to daily mass when I could at school, going to Eucharistic adoration, or at least visiting a chapel to pray and sit in the presence of the Eucharist and the tabernacle, and having, I would say, the community aspect of church. And that was all taken away when we all had to go in quarantine. So I was disconnected from my energy source, if you will. And, if you take a computer and you unplug it, it's going to still work. But since it's unplugged from the power source, it's going to slowly start dying off. And I was just in a really wild place, being cut off from the sacraments. And in retrospect, that whole experience did teach me that Jesus isn't limited to the sacraments. So, yes, the sacraments are ways in which we encounter Christ, but he's not limited to them, if you understand what I'm saying. So, for example, even though I couldn't receive communion at church, I still made an act of spiritual communion. And for anyone who's never heard of that before, making an act of spiritual communion is basically a prayer. And there are different written acts of spiritual communion you could Google that are pre written, but it's essentially a prayer inviting the Lord into your heart and expressing your desire to be united to him. And making those acts of spiritual communion very frequently during the lockdown was something that I believe gave me the quote unquote juice to keep on going.
So, lastly, as we're trying to wrap up here, if you could give Christian life hack advice to someone, what would it be?
So, something that is on my heart right now would be the word consistency. And what I mean by that is that in your life, whether you're Catholic or some other kind of Christian, I think it's so important to have consistency in your prayer, because prayer isn't just a thing you do. It's not just magic words you say. It's a living, real, organic relationship. And if you start neglecting a relationship, you start to grow apart from that person. So, for example, if you had a close friend and you stopped out of the blue texting them, calling them, just cut off all contact, or gradually did so, the relationship's going to suffer and you're going to grow very far apart from that person. And it's this literal same exact thing with prayer. If we neglect our commitment, our time, our communication with Jesus, we're not going to grow close to him. And speaking from personal experience, especially during this whole pandemic experience, I've learned the hard way that it is so important to be consistent in your prayer, because as I've neglected prayer, I've noticed how that bleeds over into other aspects of my life, and I'm just miserable all across the board. And I've noticed that when I am paying attention to my spiritual life and making it the top priority, everything else, it bleeds over into everything else, and everything else goes well, whether that's school, relationships with family and friends, my personal mental health and whatnot, and physical health as well. All of that, I believe, is so interconnected to my spiritual life that when my spiritual life suffers, everything else does as well. So that's why I really recommend just being very consistent and making your prayer a priority.
I'm going to have to agree with you on that one, on how consistency is key. Because this Lent, I decided to dedicate the first hour of my day to spiritual reading, and it helped a lot. I'd do like the daily readings, a meditation to go with the daily readings, and then I would study a book about the Mass, or I read a book called A Year with Mary, and I noticed a difference during that time, and I slacked off afterwards and can definitely tell a difference.
I think I'm definitely going to need to try that out, because if I'm being 100% honest, one of the first things I do when I wake up and I start my day is to grab my phone, check Facebook, check Instagram, check Twitter, check whatever else, and really give those first waking moments a functionality to my phone and not to anything that's more important.
Same here. I need to get back into the groove of things. So I believe that is all the time that we have for today. I think it has been a great first episode, and I hope to see more of y'all in the future. See ya.
So yes, so thank you. So stick around and we'll see you soon in our next episode. Thanks for listening to the show. We hope we've given you some insight into what it's like growing up Catholic. We'd love if you connected with us on social media. Just search for Religious Sentiments on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube. God bless.